The Florida sun blazed over Rick Harmon's farmland, beating down on acres of pasture and pond. The air shimmered with heat. Cicadas hummed in the background, a sound as constant as the earth beneath his boots. For Rick, a third-generation farmer, it was supposed to be another ordinary afternoon. But beneath a rotting stump, hidden in a mound of vegetation, something ancient stirred. Eggs, strange, leathery, otherworldly, waiting to hatch. What seemed at first like curiosity would soon spiral into terror, forcing Rick to shut down his entire farm. This is not just the story of one man's close call. It is the story of Florida itself, a land where the line between civilization and raw wilderness is paper-thin. And sometimes, when you least expect it, that wilderness pushes back. Rick Harmon knew his land better than most men know their own reflections. He had grown up here, running barefoot through the fields, fishing in the pond at the property's edge, and working beside his father and grandfather to keep the family farm alive. Florida was his home, and Florida was unpredictable. Beyond the glossy postcards of Disney castles and sugar-white beaches lay a harsher truth. Florida is a wild frontier. Flat, humid, unforgiving. Cypress swamps stretch into forever. Tannin-stained rivers creep like veins through the land. Ranches and farmlands carve out order, but only temporarily. Because here, the wilderness is not tamed. It waits, always close. And in this wilderness rules one ancient predator, the American alligator. The American alligator is more than a reptile. It is a survivor of cataclysm, a creature older than Florida itself. Their lineage stretches back over 200 million years, sharing the Earth with dinosaurs. When the meteors fell and ice ages came, they endured. They are evolution perfected, armored hides, bone-crushing jaws, and patience that outlasts time itself. But their power is not just in hunting. They shape their ecosystem. During droughts, gators carve deep water holes with their snouts and claws, preserving life for fish, turtles, and birds. They are engineers of survival. Yet this same creature, guardian of wetlands, is also a ruthless apex predator, feared by everything that moves, including humans. And when it comes to reproduction, few animals guard their young with such ferocity.
Late spring. Florida's heat pressed down like a suffocating blanket. Rick worked the brush near the pond, clearing out weeds and scrub around an old tree stump. He moved slowly under the relentless sun, sweat trickling down his back. That's when he saw it. A mound, too orderly to be natural. A heap of leaves, sticks, and mud piled 3 feet high and 6 feet across. He leaned in, nudging the rotting vegetation with his shovel. Eggs, dozens of them. Off-white, leathery, unlike any bird eggs Rick had ever seen. His brow furrowed. They looked too big for turtles, too tough for chickens, and far too many for anything local he knew. His mind turned to Florida's other invasive menace, Burmese pythons. They had been spreading through the state, laying enormous clutches. Maybe this was one of theirs. Snake eggs, he thought, harmless if left alone. Being cautious, Rick walked back to his barn, grabbed a bundle of bright survey flags, and marked the nest with a careful circle. He didn't want workers or cattle stumbling too close. Problem solved, he figured. He returned to work, brushing it off as just another oddity of farm life. But when he spotted a second mound near another stump, and then a third along the shoreline, something tugged at his nerves. Still, he shrugged it off. Probably just snakes. Florida was full of surprises. He was wrong. Days later, Rick returned to the site. Curiosity tugged at him. He wanted to see what would emerge. As he approached the flagged mound, his boots crunched the dry grass. The nest looked disturbed, eggs broken, shells cracked open. He knelt down. The air buzzed with insects. The pond surface still as glass. Slowly, from the eggs, tiny reptilian forms emerged. Not snakes, alligators. Dozens of them. Rick's heart slammed in his chest. Baby alligators chirped, high-pitched calls piercing the heavy air. His fascination curdled into dread. He realized, in a gut-freezing instant, what those sounds meant. They weren't just cries of life. They were alarms. Because when hatchlings call, their mother comes, and she comes with fury. Every egg cracked open was a biological landmine. The sound of chirping hatchlings was not random. It was a signal, a dinner bell for the fiercest protector in Florida's swamps. Female alligators do not abandon their nests. They linger, silent, hidden, and when the babies hatch, they erupt into action. Rick didn't know it yet, but he had just stepped into the deadliest zone of all, a gator nursery. If the mothers were nearby, and they always were, he was already being watched. He stood frozen, his breath shallow, as if any movement might trigger the ancient predator lurking beyond the pond's surface. It was a miracle he walked away at all.
Rick didn't call his neighbors, he didn't call the sheriff, he called the only people who could handle what he just uncovered, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. His voice shook as he described the nests, the eggs, the hatching babies. The dispatcher didn't hesitate. An officer was on the way. Rick paced the edge of his barnyard, scanning the tree line, every shadow a threat. The weight of realization pressed on him. His cattle often drank at that pond. His workers cut brush near the shoreline, and he had been kneeling inches from hatchlings, their mother surely within striking distance. He had been inches from death. When the officer arrived, he carried binoculars and comm authority. Rick led him to the pond. From a safe distance, the officer raised his lenses. Not 3 nests, 5. Each one a fortress of decaying vegetation, each one potentially guarded by a mother whose instincts knew only one command: kill anything that comes close. The officer explained why Rick's farm had been chosen: the secluded pond, the rotting stumps, perfect for nest mounds, the absence of boat traffic, the thick, quiet vegetation. To an alligator, Rick's farm wasn't just land, it was a nursery. The verdict was absolute. The area was now a danger zone. Rick's farm could not operate until the nests and mothers were dealt with. Cattle, workers, even Rick himself, none were safe. With a heavy heart, he shut down the farm. The fields fell silent. Within a day, the FWC team arrived, alligators wranglers, men and women seasoned in the dangerous art of handling living dinosaurs. Their job was twofold: protect the hatchlings and relocate the mothers. The hatchlings came first. Carefully, under the watchful eyes of the wranglers, the babies were gathered. Their tiny bodies wriggled, chirping incessantly, but each sound was a beacon of danger. Every second spent near the nests carried the risk of an ambush. Then came the mothers. The team set massive baited traps along the pond. Each night, the water's surface rippled. Each morning, they checked, and one by one, the giants were caught. Massive females, jaws bound, eyes burning with primal fury, were hauled out of the water and relocated far from Rick's land. 3 mothers captured, dozens of hatchlings removed, and slowly, the danger receded.
When the last trap was hauled away, silence settled over the pond. Rick stood at the water's edge, staring at the reflection of clouds drifting over the swampy surface. His farm was safe again. But safe no longer meant simple. He understood now. This land had never truly belonged to him. The farm, the pond, the soil beneath his boots, all of it was shared ground with creatures older, stronger, and infinitely more adapted to survival. The gators weren't intruders. He was. Word spread quickly. Neighbors whispered the tale: a farmer who stumbled into a hidden nursery of alligators, a man forced to shut down his entire farm until the danger was removed. Rick's story became a cautionary legend, retold in feed stores and diners across the county. Florida is not a place conquered by man. It is a place negotiated. You may raise cattle here, grow citrus, clear brush, but always, beneath the surface, the wilderness waits. And sometimes it rises, leathery and ancient, to remind you of its claim. Rick Harmon went back to farming, but he did so with new eyes, always scanning the pond's edge, always listening for the faintest ripple. Because once you've knelt beside a hatching nest of apex predators, you never forget how close death can be. And you never forget that in Florida, the wild is not out there.
The wild is right here, waiting.